When I return to the Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Alright. We're going to search someone else. Yes, the defense formally demands the search be conducted. Well, don't say you weren't warned, but your typical Nipponese stubbornness may well land you in hot water this time. Perhaps the lesson will do you some good. I think I've given him his Russian accent. Fair enough. I've got nothing to hide. Very well then. Bailiff, conduct a search of the inspector's... The defense demands a search, but not of Inspector Gregson. What? Now what's all this? I'm the one you're accusing, aren't I? I thought you wanted to search me. No, Inspector, not you. Somebody else. What's the meaning of all this, eh? Lost it at last, have you, Sunshine? The court shouldn't have put up with this nonsense. You're being completely irrational. Be quiet, all of you. Oh, Cyrus. Ryuno's doing what you all told him to do and having the courage of his convictions. You should respect that and listen to what he has to say in good faith. Because that's the British way. Well said, young lady. Indeed, this court is in awe of the defense counsel's conviction and eagerly awaits his next words. In what? Now don't be hasty, my lord. I'm not mistaken about the things I've seen in court today. I'm fairly sure that I know who has that disc at the moment. There's only one person it can be. Counsel, of whom do you request this search now? The man standing beside him. Well, I have to hit the button.
Take that!
Of course, my lord. Mr. Nash Skulkin. Well, I never... Blimey, me? Him? Very well then, bailiff. Restrain the witness and conduct a thorough search of his personal effects.
Hold it!
Please, my lord. Inspector. Scotland Yard has to object to this search.
Objection!
Unfortunately for you, Inspector, your objections carry no weight here. Aye? In this courtroom, only the prosecution and the defense have the authority to object. But Lord Van Zieks, I have no idea what forces are in play that might influence your actions. But personally, I have no intention of obstructing the course of this trial. Bailiff, carry out the search. Now, hold on a little, or I don't know nothing. Nothing about no disc. Cut it out. No, here, my lord, in the witness's pocket. I found this. Good lord, that's... another music box disc. Oh, I don't know nothing about it, nothing. That is the second music box disc left behind by Magnus McGilded. Is it not, Inspector Gregson? Order, Mr. Skulkin, what have you to say for yourself? Gordon Bennett, just Gordon Flamin' Bennett. I'll swear I didn't know nothing about that disc, honest to God. Counsel, would you please explain what exactly is going on here? The alleged deal that was struck was between this witness and this detective, no? Without question, my lord. Then for pity's sake, why on earth was this man in possession of the disc that the inspector traded for information? Inspector Gregson is a shrewd, calculating man who rarely loses his composure, but at one particular point in this trial he exhibited some unusual behavior for a brief moment. I don't recall. What unusual behavior? It was, yes, during my cross-examination of Mr. Graydon. Tell me, Mr. Graydon, when you left the pawnbrokery that night, was it by any chance with the second disc in your jacket pocket? Admit anything of the sort. While Mr. Graydon answered my questions, the inspector appeared to have grabbed Nash Skulkin by his coat and was shaking him violently. Yeah, he did know. Thought me noggin was gonna fall clean off, I did. I was wishing I'd been born as me brother, I was. And what exactly happened to make the detective attack you like that? Oh, I ain't got a clue. He just suddenly turned and grabbed me, whistled like that, and started shaking me. What the blazes, didn't you mention the third gun when we got you down the station? That's what he said. Nearly right down my ear hole, he did. Me head's throbbing now. The way the detective behaved then was extremely out of character, but looking back now, it must have been then that he did it. That was the opportunity Inspector Gregson created for himself in order to hide the disc. Well, bless my wig, he hid it. Yeah, but I'm afraid I failed to comprehend the motive here. If the detective had acquired the disc he was after, why on earth would he then proceed to hide it in another man's pocket? This is a court of law. He could have submitted the item as evidence. It would appear, my lord, the inspector was not at liberty to do that. Why ever not? As the man himself revealed earlier, his current assignment has some special conditions. My orders were recover the medium used to convey the secrets leaked from the ministry and do it on the QT. Strictly hush-hush. Hush-hush. A top-secret assignment, is it? As far as we're aware, the information stolen comes from confidential government communications. It would seem that if that information were to be revealed in court as evidence, it would be problematic. Does that sum up the situation, Inspector? Well, I'm operating under direct orders from the Ministry. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to answer that question. So, realizing there was a chance that you may be searched here in court, you took steps to hide the disc you had acquired from the witness. Does this mean? He only pretended to attack Mr. Skulkin in order to get close enough to him to slip the second disc into his pocket. So it was all a pretense. Well now, Inspector Gregson, and you, Mr. Graydon, are you prepared to admit to the accusation made against you of this alleged deal? Admit it. Yours truly, please. Mr. Graydon. Clearly our Eastern visitor has an uncommonly active imagination. However, there's no proof that I passed that disc to the inspector. But then, how do you explain the reason why you knew about the peephole? I'm under no obligation to explain. What? Yes, I lied in my testimony, that I admit, so sentence me accordingly, but that is all I admit. Murder, leaking government secrets, striking a deal with a detective, all of it is this young Eastern man's fancy. I have no idea what any of that is about. What? Well, what about you then, Inspector Gregson? Do you admit to making a deal with Mr. Graydon in order to acquire the disc? Ladies and gents of the jury, as a Scotland Yard inspector, I will declare this and nothing more. I am acting in the best interests of the country. Whatever I've done, it's been in the name of justice. So, as members of the public of this fine country, I'd like to think that justice will be your guiding light when you're making your decisions. This is quite a quandary indeed. Rarely have I encountered such an extraordinary tumultuousness in the concluding of a trial. Nevertheless, in the absence of any further evidence to be presented, I believe it is time that we put the matter to the jury for their final leanings. Well now, as a fellow servant of Queen and Country, I must say I sympathize with you, Inspector. Yes, he's a dependable man, I'm quite sure. In service, one becomes a good judge of character. Even crossing your eyes doesn't help when it comes to looking at this case. It's all blood to me. As a fellow professional, I'd like to put my faith in the detective, actually. Raiden is highly skilled operator. Stop. Currently in presence of idols. Stop. Detective has very much trust in eyes. More than this, I cannot say. I don't believe it. These 6 jurors are... They're going to believe Gregson. If they declare their decision now... Is Ginny going to be found guilty? If I don't manage to produce some definitive evidence right now, then we're going to lose. Either some proof that Graydon killed Mr. Windibank, or stole those government secrets, or some evidence to force Gregson into admitting that he struck a deal with the witness. Well then, counsel, I think it's time I imposed on the jurors to declare their final decisions, no? That is, unless you have some compelling evidence you have thus far not presented to the court. If I let the judge call on the jurors to announce their leanings, Gino will be found guilty. So there's no choice then, Runo. You have to throw some more evidence at them. This is it now. It all comes down to this. Who do I present evidence against? Gregson or Graydon? Well, just finding out what's on that disc would prove what it is, right? Which would prove that he hid it. Yeah. Inspector Gregson, there is one final piece of evidence I would like you to see. Aye? What's that then? If you refuse to acknowledge that you did in fact strike a deal with the witness here today, then you leave us no choice but to examine this piece of evidence thoroughly. Well, go on. This is my last chance. It looks like I'm going to have to force his hand here. One final piece of evidence to get this detective to admit to the deal he clearly struck with Graydon. It's gotta be... It's gotta be the box then, because I don't have that disc, so it's gotta be this.
Take that!
Is that Mr. McGilded's peculiar music box, counsel? Yes, with the disc already in place, ready to play. I think perhaps now would be a good time to listen to the sound produced by the music box again. Only this time, with the second disc we've just discovered set in place as well. Goodness, this disc, counsel.
Hold it!
No, wait, I can't let you do that. Why not? Because it's not got nothing to do with this case, that's why.
Objection!
Not true, Inspector. Aye? Defense has already proposed that the sounds heard by the court earlier from this music box were part of a Morse code message. We know that Morse code comprises of 2 distinct tones. The defense believes that the second disc contains the second tone needed to complete the message. And now we have a chance to confirm that theory. Crying out loud, Sunshine, we're talking about state secrets here. If you go letting the whole courtroom hear confidential information like that, it's treason. Then do you admit the charge? That in order to protect those state secrets you engaged in unlawful dealings with the witness. You're mad. If you let that secret information out into the public domain, you'll be making an enemy of the entire British government, you idiot!
Objection!
Let's not forget, Inspector, that you, a Scotland Yard officer, leaked confidential case details to a witness. That you continue to lie to the court, and all because, by fair means or foul, you're determined to do your duty. Well, by fair means or foul, I'm prepared to do mine. Don't you dare. I will stop at nothing to protect my client. I don't care who I make an enemy of. How is this guy not completely well, I guess because he mostly throws his goblet away rather than actually drink any of it. My lord, if you please, the court must hear the sounds made by that music box. Come on, Van Zeeks, for Pete's sake, stop him!
Objection!
Inspector, you should know my methods by now. I'm a prosecutor. I'm not Scotland Yard. I'm no Scotland Yard puppet. In this courtroom, my duty is to the law, so let me propose a toast to uncovering the truth. By fair means, or foul. Very well. The defense's stance here and that of the prosecution has been made very clear, I feel. Therefore, in accordance with the defense's request, the court will now listen as this music box is set in operation once more. This time with the second disc in place and both discs playing simultaneously. Oh, listen to that. It's unmistakable now. It's Morse code. All right, I admit it. Whatever you want, but for the love of God, shut that blooming box up. Let me ask you again then, Inspector Gregson. Did you, or did you not, strike a deal with the witness next to you in the stand, Mr. Ashley Graydon? Specifically, did you furnish the witness with confidential case details in exchange for this music box disc? Did you reveal the existence of the people in the pawnbroker's storeroom, Inspector? Oh, I did. Stop, what are you doing, man? It's all exactly like the young Eastern lawyer said. When the trial resumed after the recess and we were stood here in the stand together, that's when he approached me with the deal. Shut up, you imbecile. Shut up. You there. Who are we talking to? You're the detective who turned up at the pawnbroker the other day, aren't you? Oh, we must be doing a flashback. I may have something you're looking for, Inspector, with me at this very moment. So how about a trade? I suggest you accept. Information that may make certain individuals uncomfortable will soon become very public indeed. No, I couldn't let that information become public knowledge, not under any circumstances. So I accepted the man's proposal and told him details about the case that should have put him in the clear. The peephole in the storeroom door, and the bloodstains on the overcoat. By giving false testimony, this witness intended to have the defendant wrongly accused of murder. Inspector, you knew that, yet you still revealed those details to facilitate the witness's perjury. Oh, I did. But then it turned out the peephole had only been made that night after the incident took place. Scotland Yard wasn't aware of that, if I'm perfectly honest. Well, Mr. Graydon, what do you have to say for yourself? There's nothing and no one left for you to hide behind. You struck a deal with the inspector in order to escape conviction of a very serious crime. Namely this. You are the third intruder who broke into the pawnbrokery on the night in question. And you perpetrated the murder of the proprietor, Mr. Pop Windibank. You... traitor! I feel like he could probably break that cane. It's mostly already broken anyway. Bailiff! Bailiff! Restrain that man! At once! That's it then. It's all over. It's all over but the ellipses. I despised my life growing up, those slums of vile places. I was cursed from birth, born into poverty, the son of a penniless artisan. My parents did nothing but quarrel all day long. What little money they had was never spent on me. So I set about studying, to better myself, to one day escape from that hellhole.
And you eventually became a communications officer. I admire your determination.
But then you decided to try to sell government secrets. Why?
Isn't it obvious?
Because I wanted money. Even now, years later, the nightmares of my life in the slums wake me up in the small hours. I wanted to drown them out, with more money than anyone who lived in that squalor could ever imagine. Then one day, I met him. Mr. Magnus McGilded. You're a fiend with a queer talent, so I have money to throw your way if you're interested. All you need to do is go along with my little plan now. I was to steal the Ministry's telegraphic message logs, and McGilded would buy them for a handsome sum. As I was responsible for inspections of the Ministry's communications office, it was a simple enough task. The lure of the devil's offerings. How easy it is to succumb.
But you must surely have realized the seriousness of the crime you were committing.
And for that reason, I took great lengths to ensure that my actions were untraceable. By using the music box. My father was a brickmaker, though my mother divorced him when I was still a child. Yes, Mr. Mason Milverton. That's right. He was very skilled with his hands. He'd once been a music box maker's apprentice. I imagined his skills would be sufficient to create a machine that could generate Morse code. So I sought out my father again, to employ his services. It was the first time I'd seen him since I left the slums 10 years earlier. What is this jarring art style that doesn't fit the rest of the game?
Look at you, Ashley. What a fine gent you've become, eh?
He was a different man to the one in my memory. A thin, frail old man. But poverty had never broken him, never corrupted him like it had me. I was sure that he wouldn't help me if I told him the real reason. So I made up a story. I've got some work for you, Father. I need music box discs made.
Music box discs, eh? A musician friend of mine has written some music he wants to sell.
Oh, is it? Who's talking now? Just put a goddamn name on it. A musician friend of mine has written some music he wants to sell to the public. I brought the score with me. There are 2, actually. I'd be delighted.
I'd be delighted, son. It's been 20 years since I did any work like this, though. Fetch my tools, would you? They're in the loft.
That's how I had him make the 2 discs. Thereby splitting the information in 2. You were taking considerable precautions indeed. It was to protect myself as much as anything. It meant that I could deal with McGilded in 2 separate transactions. The first involved the first of the 2 discs and the music box for playing them. I exchanged them with McGilded for 10 guineas. Then, on receipt of the second disc, he would pay 1,000 guineas. So, what happened on the omnibus 2 months ago was the second part of the deal, the exchange of the second disc. Yes, I'd sold the man information that way a number of times already, but it seems he became reluctant to part with his money.
That doesn't quite make sense, Mr. Graydon, for why was it that on the omnibus 2 months ago, your father, Mr. Milverton, was the one dealing with Mr. McGilded and not yourself?
When I received 1,000 guineas after my first completed dealings with McGilded, I decided to give 200 to my father for his troubles. But my father realized something was amiss. In time, he worked out that I must be involved in something dubious, and when he did, he said to me,
"Next time there's an exchange, you'll let your old man do it, understand? Otherwise, I won't take your money anymore."
That was my father's way of dealing with it, I suppose. Climb into the omnibus, hand over the second disc, and take the money from the Gilded. That's it. He had no idea what was actually on the discs I had asked him to make. He never knew. Just like I'll never know why everything went so horribly wrong that night. All I know is that the disc was taken from him, and he never returned home. I'd still like to know why the carriage caught on fire. It was only then that I found out what sort of a monster McGilded really was. So after 10 years of not once uttering it, I swore on my father's name to exact revenge. Ah, here we go. Revenge? As anyone with even the remotest knowledge of the man will no doubt be able to imagine, McGilded brought all his wealth and influence to bear in the most despicable of ways to crush any semblance of justice in this trial. The crime scene was tampered with, evidence was fixed, and witnesses were bribed. That trial 2 months ago was a farce from start to finish. My feet had barely touched British soil back then, and I walked into that hornet's nest completely unaware of the sinister background to it all. I'd made plenty of money out of my dealings with McGilded by then, so I spared nothing in my arrangements 2 months ago. I knew exactly who to hire. If you're willing to pay the price, there are people in this city willing to do anything you ask. McGilded himself had shown me that. Are you saying that... I think you have the picture now. After he twisted everything to his favor in this courtroom to ensure that he walked free, I took matters into my own hands and delivered the justice that monster deserved. That tragic accident following the trial here 2 months ago was planned and executed by yours truly. Mr. McGilded's death that day was caused by this man.
Everything's ready, sir, if you'd follow me into the courtroom.
Let's yes, officer. 'Tis sooner than I was led to believe.
If it's not an inconvenience, sir, there's some changes to the schedule.
Well, I must be making tracks now. 'Tis time for the inspection. They're going to examine the omnibus again, so I'm told. I asked if I could be present for it myself. I see. So that policeman who came to tell McGilded he could examine the omnibus again. That's right, an impostor, hired by me. McGilded used his wealth to manipulate the trial. He paid people to adulterate the omnibus with all manner of false evidence. He threatened witnesses to lie in their testimony. So I gave the man a taste of his own medicine. Once the omnibus was doused in paraffin, one of my sham policemen ushered McGilded inside and sent him on a one-way journey to hell. An eye for an eye. That's how I avenged my father's death.
A spine-chilling account indeed.
But that wasn't the end of it for me. There was a loose end, you see. A loose end. Yes, I should think it's obvious. The second disc, which my father had taken to exchange with McGilded.
Ah, yes. There was indeed no mention of it in the man's trial 2 months ago, clearly because it had been removed from the scene of the crime.
When I realized it was missing, I remembered something. Something from the first time I dealt with McGilded. This is the first of the 2 discs, and the music box you need to play them. Hey, look at that now. What an ingenious little invention. So, then, as promised, 10 guineas for you young man. What's this? Winterbank's pawnbroker, eh? Ah, it is a pawnbroker's ticket, so it is. You can use it to redeem an article I've deposited there for you. There's no need to give a name, just hand over the ticket and tell the fiend the watchword. I've put a jewel in pawn for you. It'll fetch a good 10 guineas if you sell it, so it will. Never heard of a pawnbroker being used in quite that way before. Have you not, Mr. Graydon? London's pawnbrokers are very useful places, you know. Each one is like an extremely secure vault. So I knew that if he'd taken steps to hide the disc, it would be in that pawnbrokery somewhere, and that on the night he killed my father, he must have entrusted the ticket to someone. Yes, to Gina. I remember now.
that when we first met you at Windibanks that afternoon 2 days ago, you had a description of Miss Lestrade written down. How did you know who you were looking for?
From the trial, that pickpocket's testimony was clearly peculiar. Anyone could see that. I realized immediately that she was another of McGilded's pawns, that he must have threatened her somehow. I was fairly convinced it would be her who had the ticket, so I started to make some inquiries. I had a strong suspicion the girl would come out of the woodwork on the redemption deadline. He was absolutely right. And yes, sure enough, she did. All I needed to do was wait until the girl went to Windibanks to redeem the articles. But unfortunately, she redeemed only McGilded's overcoat and the one disc that was in the pocket. The all-important music box with the second disc inside was missing, because it had already been forfeited 2 days earlier. But I was unaware of that fact. Had I not been, I could have avoided my nighttime excursion. Meanwhile, as our investigation into the stolen government secrets was progressing, we picked up on the fact that McGilded was involved. Inspector, you've recovered fast. My orders were to recover the stolen information as quickly as possible, so we started gathering the fellow's possessions and examining whatever we could lay our hands on. We had a full-scale investigation going on at the yard, but we had to keep it as quiet as we could. Then, when the inspector here took the disc from me in the pawnbrokery that day, I became nervous. I was sure the music box and the second disc were still there in the shop somewhere, so I knew that it was a race against time. I had to find those articles before the police did. So that's what prompted you to break into the place that same night. With the help of your old friends, the Skulkin brothers. What happened that night in the pawnbrokery I can only describe as a nightmare. While Nash and Ringo was researching the counter, I'd located the music box I'd sold to McGilded on the shelves of forfeited articles, and the second disc was inside. Yes, I slipped it into my pocket with a very deep sigh of relief, but then something entirely unexpected happened.
What are you doing in my shop?
A gunshot rang out in the shop, and I felt a sharp pain in my left arm. The broker fired his gun, and the bullet pierced your limb. Yes, exactly. And unfortunately, I had decided to bring my own gun with me that night, just in case. Before I knew what was happening, I'd fired back. The man had already turned to flee. I hadn't intended to fire in his direction, much less kill him. But unfortunately for both of us, the bullet hit home. It struck him in the middle of his back as he fled through the storeroom door for refuge.
Sorry tale.
It all took place in the blink of an eye. I don't imagine Nash and Ringo even realized what had happened at first. I was terrified, so I fled. And that's the whole story. That's everything that happened at Windibanks on that wretched night. Earlier, you called McGilded a monster, a man who used his wealth and influence to distort the facts and escape justice for the crime of murder. What tragic irony, for what you have done is exactly the same. You've become the very monster you saw and despised so deeply in McGilded. Yes, I think I have.
Well, this has been a long and exhausting trial. However, it would seem that at last we have arrived at the truth. Inspector Gregson, what of Mr. Ashley Graydon?
He's been restrained, my lord, and being escorted to the yard. He'll be charged with the murder of Mr. Windibank and the stealing of government secrets.
Very good. And you, Inspector? Regrettably, you will have to face charges yourself.
Yes, my lord, of course. It transpires that you were complicit in helping a criminal escape justice. That fact remains whether or not you were doing so in the line of duty. Crime is a serious one, Inspector, and inexcusable.
Now to the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade.
Oh, yeah?
It is time for the final adjudication. Is the jury ready, Mr. Foreman?
Yes, sir. Garrett Squadron standing by, sir. This is really it now. The last push, the final call, the finishing whistle. My men are ready to deliver their verdict.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Very well, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. You will now declare your final decisions to the court.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Ah, that's the stuff. I'm off the hook. Finally, Ryuno, you managed to do it. Finally is the word. I really wasn't sure if we'd come out on top for a while there. Susie was right. You're the best lawyer in the world.
Miss Lestrade, I'm not finished with you yet.
Hey, what are you looking at me like that for?
Before you start enjoying your freedom, there are certain other crimes to consider. 2 months ago, in my courtroom no less, you gave false testimony, did you not? And in relation to the trial today, not only did you unlawfully enter Winterbank's pawnbrokery, you also attempted to abscond with Mr. McGilded's property, it seems.
No, I've never done nothing of the sort. Of course not. It's not like you were gleefully wearing McGilded's coat in your cell yesterday or anything. Aw, and just when I was getting excited about throwing a party for Ginny this evening.
And turning our attention to the defense, determining that, when played together, the music box discs contained a message in Morse code was, well, it was certainly a most unexpected revelation, counsel.
Quite so, my lord. The prosecution was caught entirely off guard. In fact, I think we should applaud my learned friend's courage here today. I propose a toast to demanding that government secrets be disseminated before the entire courtroom. Very sorry about that. It was the only way I could get Inspector Gregson to admit what he'd done, so... If I may say something on that point, isn't that... It's, about the sounds produced by the music box before. I do wonder if that was really Morse code at all. What are you saying, madam? Oh, well, it's just that I'm really rather fanatical when it comes to Morse code, you see. So much so that the whole world seems to be covered in dots and dashes to me, in fact.
Goodness, madam, an unhealthy level of obsession one feels.
But I must say that, in my opinion, the sounds produced by those 2 discs were nothing more than that. A meaningless series. I think that's supposed to be a meaningless series of 2 different tones. What? Nani? Can that really be? It wasn't Morse code after all? My lord, the defense would like to listen to the music box again. Oh, you had a few nut. How many times do I have to tell you? Those discs contain ministerial secrets, sunshine. This courtroom is not an appropriate forum to discuss the nature of the government communications. We know McGilded conspired to trade national secrets with our enemies, secrets acquired from Mr. Graydon. Now that the man has admitted to his crimes, we have no need to pursue the matter further.
But it's really going to bother me. Miss Lestrade.
Yeah, my lord?
That which you have seen today here in this courtroom has been extremely disturbing.
Falsified evidence, intimidation, perjury, a grim catalogue of depravity.
An appalling experience to befall any child.
Come on, it ain't nothing I don't see most days in the back slums. She's gone Australian.
I beg your pardon?
If you're weak, you pay for it. That's just how life is. Gina. But Look, I reckon I'll work something out today. The world ain't fair, but if you want it to change, you've got to start at home. You've got to change how you are yourself.
Well, it's a very laudable lesson, I would say. I eagerly look forward to the born-again Miss Lestrade never gracing my courtroom with her presence again. Now, with regard to the murder of Mr. Pop Winderbank, proprietor of a pawnbrokery business on Baker Street, I hereby declare the defendant, Miss Gina Lestrade,
Not guilty. Jesus, that was a long one.
That is all. Court is adjourned.
How is there anything left in that? On a personal note, I must say you've surprised me, my Far Eastern friend. Oh. Despite being a Nipponese, you saw through the pretense to the malice that festered within that Englishman, and at the same time saw through the grime to the surprising heart of your English client. You have a curious talent for judging character, especially considering our very different cultures. I don't think there's anything curious about it. Whether we're from the Empire of Great Britain or the Empire of Japan, we're all human beings. We're not so very different on the inside. Yeah, I mean, both committed atrocities against indigenous people. You know, I took this case for one very simple reason. To lock swords with you once again here in the courtroom. You did? When I encountered you for the first time 2 months ago, it reminded me of toasting friendship and trust with another Nipponese, only to find my trust betrayed. Through you, I hope to look into the eyes of the man I once knew and try to understand. You mentioned something similar earlier today about total betrayal at the hands of the Japanese. What happened exactly? Well, you may ask, and one day, when the time comes, you will learn the answer, whether you like it or not. Does he mean whether I like the answer or not, or he's going to forcibly tell me the answer whether I want him to or not? Alright, then I'll wait for that day, if I must. Coming to be known as the Reaper of the Bailey, and my retirement from service 5 years ago, it gives me cause to wonder if our meeting has some deeper purpose. So, farewell, my learned Nipponese fellow, until we meet again. The Old Bailey, defendant's antechamber. It's done. It's over at last. But where's Iris disappeared to? Why do we still have her manuscript in my inventory? Congratulations, Gina. I knew it all along. I knew that you were innocent. Of that, anyway. Well, you did what you said, Mr. Naruhodo. You believed in me, right up to the end. You're as odd as your name. What's odd about it? I told you I had faith in you, didn't I? No one ever has before, see? I kept a promise, properly. That's awful. I figured something out today. All my life, growing up in the slums, I never trusted no one. But that's just because I've been scared of me. I've been scared of being stabbed in the back. The more you trust someone, the more it hurts when they let you down. Yes, I can understand that. After all, I had a taste of it in that trial 2 months ago. I chose to trust someone and paid for it. That betrayal left a big scar. You know, though, Gina, I worked something out quite recently, too. Trusting in someone else is really an exercise in learning to trust yourself. And when your gut tells you it's the right thing to do and your trust is rewarded, there's no better feeling in the world. I think I have you to thank for reminding me of that valuable lesson. Oh, well, if you say so. Don't make a fat lot of sense to me, though. I'm trying to say that putting my faith in you, Gina, has been a real pleasure. For crying out loud, pack it in! But I suppose I sort of feel the same way. I mean, sometimes trusting someone else is, alright. Thanks. Two awkward people go do something else right now. This is the way I see it, Ryunosuke. A defense lawyer is only as good as his faith in his client. And that comes down to how much faith he has in himself. After this experience, I'm starting to feel like I understand what you mean, Kazuma. Am I living up to your expectations? Am I turning out to be the lawyer you believed I could be?
Pardon the interruption. From who?
Ah. But what the deuce does a man have to do to be noticed around here, my dear fellow? That voice. It's too late for that voice now, Mr. Naruhodo. I've been standing here patiently in the corner of the room for an eternity. Aha, yes, it was me, all along, Dio. I would have said when finally you noticed me. But you people, with your incessant babbling. Mr. Sholmes. Ah, yes, it was me all along. Dio, you see? I'd assumed you'd been taken back to the hospital, to be honest. Indeed I was, but I managed to escape again. Oh. I happened to be aware of one or two foibles of the doctor who was tending to me. I merely made my knowledge of them known to the man, and he happily issued me with a leave of absence. Now very above board. But enough of my adventures. That was a fine victory, Mr. Naruhodo. Your tireless efforts justly rewarded, I feel. Congratulations are in order. As a close friend, I tip my hat to you. Thank you. Some great detective you are. Great at being cold as ice, maybe. Have I hurt you in some way, Miss Lestrade? Well, you've been having a snooze in your nice soft bed. Some of us have been fighting for our lives. Well, that bullet did cause me to lose a substantial amount of blood, it's true. So I have indeed been feeling somewhat cold. Not perhaps as cold as ice, but, well, have a feel. Could you take your hands off my neck, please, Mr. Sholmes? And in some way, I suppose, congratulations are in order for you too, Miss Lestrade. What's that supposed to mean? What's all I've ordered? Well, naturally, it isn't my intention to alarm you, but an acquittal in a trial with that particular prosecutor is perhaps a little precarious. Well done, Mr. Sholmes. Not alarming in the slightest. Oh, the Reaper, you mean? Because anyone who's found not guilty in a trial he was working on winds up dead anyway, is that it? The very point I was trying to make. And exemplified by the fate of Mr. McGilded, in fact. But of course, I pay no attention to such irrational drivel myself. Yeah, well, it don't bother me. Really? Of course not. The way I see it, the Reaper's a bit like him upstairs. What? Him upstairs? You mean, like, God? Yeah, him upstairs knows what's what, right? He knows what people are like on the inside. He won't have got the wrong end of the stick. There are some coves like that bog trotter what are rotten to the core. At the end of the day, him upstairs makes sure they get what they deserve. Suppose that's one way of looking at it. Divine justice is one thing, though. The Reaper taking matters into his own hands and claiming lives is another. Well, I ain't like the McGildeds of this world, so I ain't scared. I've got principles, see? A trait in you, which is to be admired, Miss Lestrade. Boy, just give it a rest, alright? As I said, congratulations are in order. The news of your acquittal was very welcome news to me indeed. Let me express my heartfelt congratulations, Gina. Well, there you are, Hurley. How long have you been here? Honestly, I went to the main entrance especially to meet you there. Ah, Iris, my dear, I do apologize. But wait until I tell you what happened. This pair made utter fools of themselves. What happened? As you know, I have a penchant for disguise. I was hiding in this room dressed as a bailiff. But these dolts didn't notice my presence at all. I had no idea. Can you imagine, Iris? Would you credit it? I'm not sure, really. I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, Hurley, but you just don't have the weighty presence you seem to think you have. In fact, you really ought to be careful about that. It's going to land you in trouble one day. I'll be careful. Ouch. Anyway, it's such a shame. I was hoping to throw a party for Ginny tonight, but you won't be able to come, will you? It looks like I'm going to be going nowhere for a while. You wear the judge's patter. I got stuff to make amends for, apparently. All of them offences. What was it again? Breaking and entering, taking the bog trotter stuff, what was in lug, blah blah blah. Yes, I think you'll find that basically being a pickpocket is the main offence. But diving ain't an offence, it's a job, ain't it? I don't think so. Still, it has got me thinking, all this. Maybe I should start looking for another line of work. I mean, you didn't start off as a lawyer, did you, Odo? Well, no, but I was never a pickpocket. Well, anyway, I reckon I could make a change. I'm gonna do something for all them lot like me from the slums. Something that makes a difference for them. It's a wonderful idea, Ginny. I can tell my mouth is getting tired of doing all this. And I'm sure you can do it. Now what is it? Nothing. Miss Gina Lestrade, the prison carriage has arrived, ma'am. Come with me to the rear gate at once. Right. Well, it looks like I'm off then. Yes. Goodbye, Gina, and good luck. Odo? Yes? What was that for? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say, so... indeed. Perhaps the situation calls for a phrase hitherto missing from your vocabulary, Mr. Lestrade. Aye, and on occasions such as this, I would recommend a simple thank you. Oh. Oh, yes. It's good advice, Ginny. Right, I see. Well... Thanks, Odo. Hey, Minnie. Thank you for everything what you've done, for believing in me. Not at all. In fact, that should be my line. Thank you, Gina. For giving me lawyer practice? I don't... What? Well, there she goes. I wonder if I'll ever see her again. Well, quite the indomitable pig purse. Oh, I nearly forgot. I bought a paper outside. It's a special edition, and this trial is all over the front page. Pickpocket's innocence proven. Isn't it wonderful? You should have shown it to Gina, Iris. She would have been thrilled.
Oh no, how silly of me. Ah, but anyway, would you like the good news or the bad news?
Not again.
Well, what do you say, Runo? Early?
As usual, I think I'd rather get the bad news out of the way first.
Absolutely not. I have no intention of listening to anything but good news. And there you have it. How people answer that question says a lot about them, doesn't it?
Let's not go there.
Alright then, maybe let's start with the good news this time. The rain has finally stopped. It was a record level of rainfall, apparently. Well, that is good news indeed. We can journey back in greater comfort.
Alright then, what's the bad news?
The huge storm has left the seas very choppy. The channel in particular is awful, so sailings out of Dover have been delayed by a day or more.
Wait, Dover?
That's right. If we head to the station immediately, we may still make it in time to wave Susie off.
But there won't be a train, surely. It wouldn't be that... We wouldn't be... Who
do you think I am, Mr. Naruhodo?
Mr. Shawls?
I rushed to Victoria Station earlier and made arrangements for a special express. If we hurry now, we shall be there in time for dinner. And I know a fine restaurant that serves the most delicious baked sole. The great detective does it again. Indeed he does. I happen to be aware of a number of the rail transport director's foibles.
What?
I merely made my knowledge of them known to the man, and he happily laid on the locomotive. Elementary.
Just an idea, but it might be wise to stop manipulating people that way.
What are we waiting for, then? To London, Victoria.
Port of Dover, quayside.
That took somewhat longer than I had anticipated. Susie's boat must be about to leave now.
Miss Susato, where are you?
The boat is over there, Susie. Over there, look. It looks like she's reading something.
Hold it!
Miss Susato, wait, what are you doing? Mr. Naruhodo, what are you doing here? We came as soon as we could after the trial. I mean, we heard that sailings were being delayed due to the bad weather, you see. Oh, I see. Then tell me, how did Gina's trial go? It went well. She was acquitted. That's wonderful. Really wonderful news. How many ending, post-ending, post-ending, post-post-endings do we have to have here? The book you were about to throw into the sea, it was your encyclopedia of British law, wasn't it? Oh dear, I was hoping you hadn't seen that. I'm not worthy of practicing law in any way now, so I was saying my final farewell. You were saying goodbye to law? You, Susato-san? Would I be correct in assuming it's because of the people, Mrs. Susato? I deliberately altered the scene of a crime, and then I tried to hide the fact. What I did is utterly unforgivable. That reminds me. How did you even come to have this, Susie? On the evening of the incident, Mr. Sholmes had invited Gina to dinner, if you remember. Oh yes, we had a wonderful time. Well, Gina gave us a little introductory lesson, didn't she? To the art of pickpocketing, I mean. Oh, that was so much fun. I stole Bruno's armband. Yes, please don't do that again, Iris. That band's very important to me. Well, if it's so important, you should pay more attention to it. You didn't notice for ages. On a whim, I thought it would be fun to see if I could take the cat flap-o-matic. So I put it up my sleeve. Really? And then I rather forgot about it, until I found myself in Mr. Windibank's shop with it later that night. I see. And then... Mr. Sholmes! Leave me, Mr. Naruhodo. Right. After Mr. Naruhodo had left the shop, I started to think. That door started to play on my mind. The storeroom door, you mean? Yes, if Gina was anywhere in the shop, I realized it could only be behind that door, and at that moment, the little device that I had up my sleeve sprang to mind. I was so worried about Gina, I simply had to know. So, you used the cat flap-o-mat to make the peephole in the door. As captured in a photographic print of the shop. By one of Hurley's red-handed recorders. Indeed, it was of the first importance, that point. Precisely when the peephole was made, that information would prove to be Mr. Naruhodo's greatest weapon. Though naturally, without proof, it would have amounted to nothing. But when I looked through the hole in the door, the sight that met my eyes made my blood run cold. Thoughts started to run through my mind. I remembered that trial 2 months earlier, the trial of Magnus McGilded. I thought about how he had manipulated the evidence and arranged false testimonies to secure his freedom. It made the British justice system feel very dark and sinister to me. And then, a terrible thought occurred to me. What if some wicked criminal was planning to do the same thing now? Because from the appearance of the crime scene, it looked exactly as though Gina had shot Mr. Windibank. Even though I was sure she would never have done such a thing. You were worried that the true culprit would try to frame her for the crime? That's right, but then I realized it would be very difficult for anyone to give false testimony in this case. But what do you mean? Well, the crime appeared to have happened behind the door of a locked room. For someone to claim falsely to have witnessed it, there would have had to have been a way to see beyond the door. Ah. For which, a peephole would be the very thing. Only the peephole I had made wasn't actually there until after the crime had been committed, of course, and the criminal would know that, so it wouldn't make any difference. But the possibility of a rather ingenious trap was there, was it not? A trap? Is that why she did it? So, is that why you kept it a secret, Susie? You never mentioned that you made the peephole to anyone, not even to the police. I know, and I knew at the time what I was doing was wrong, a criminal offense even. That's why I decided to confide in Mr. Sholmes. If Mr. Naruhodo was completely backed into a corner with no other possible means of escape, the truth about the peephole could save him. That was my plan. She really does think of everything. But then, why didn't you just tell me everything about it before the trial began? My dear fellow, you're not thinking straight. If she had done that, it would have rendered you complicit in the whole escapade. You could have been disbarred if you had been seen to have knowingly tampered with the crime scene. So Miss Usato decided to shoulder the burden of responsibility alone. For your sake and Miss Lestrade's. Miss Usato. The truth is, when it happened, I did it because I'd lost a little of my faith in the law. Oh. I was worried that the right person wouldn't be convicted of the crime, but the moment I allowed myself to think that was the moment I lost my right to call myself a judicial assistant. What you did isn't comparable to what he did. Graydon is the one who lied in the witness stand, using that peephole as a way to implicate Gina. And besides, if the peephole inconsistency hadn't existed, I'm not at all sure she would have been acquitted in the end. Miss Usato, what you did saved Gina's life. Did it, though, because... Then the inspector wouldn't have known about it, and then that whole thing would have been taken out of the testimony altogether. Well, with your kind words, Mr. Naruhodo, you saved me, too, from my regrets. Are we almost done with the dialogue?
Well, we must all be thankful that Miss Lestrade's freedom has been assured. Yes, exactly. Although some of the loose ends in that trial will continue to play on my mind, I'm sure. With the revelation that the music box disc contains secret messages, Mr. Naruhodo. What a triumph to work that out. I'm full of admiration. Well, actually, that argument wasn't quite as compelling as I thought it was. Oh, it wasn't? There was a communications officer among the jury members, you see, a telegraph operator, and she said that the majority of the sounds on the disc were just meaningless tones. As one would expect, after all, we're talking about secret government communications. No doubt they were written in cipher to avoid being readily understood should they have been intercepted. In cipher? I see. So then we could never have hoped to understand the message anyway. Nonsense, my dear fellow. It's quite a zero-pipe problem, you see. Asogi? What? Asogi? What? Well, that can't be a real word, can it? How funny. Wait. Iris, what did you say? Oh, I just said Asogi. Does that word mean something to you? Mean something? Asogi was the name of my best friend. What? But how? How do you know that name, Iris? I wrote it down during the trial before, when the message was playing on the music box. She transcribed it on the fly? She really is a genius. I thought the message probably wouldn't be written out in plain Morse code, so I tried various ways to interpret it. But whatever I tried, the words just didn't seem to make any sense. That is, in English, at least. Oh. It suddenly occurred to me, you see, there's more than one Morse code, not just the English variety. Various countries around the world have altered and added to Morse code to use it in their own languages. I don't believe it. Are you saying? That's right. I've only actually seen a chart of Japanese Morse code once before. But I think it's based on the Iroha pangram, isn't it? And you mean to say that in Japanese Morse code the message says Asogi? Yes, I think so. Sorry, but I don't remember all of the Japanese Morse code. Iris, would you let me see that? Miss Usato, do you know it? Do you know Japanese Morse code? Yes, I spent some time studying it. Because I'm quite sure Morse code will become ever more important for international communications. But might I recommend, my dear madam, that you focus your efforts on the English version. Be that as it may, Iris, show me the message, please. Of course. But what can this possibly mean? Whatever is in that long sequence of supposedly meaningless dots and dashes, it's made the color drain from Susato-san's face. There's no doubt that this message is written in Japanese Morse code. So the British Empire has been using Japanese for its secret communications? I don't understand the reason why, but the message appears to be a list of 4 people's names. 4 names. The first is Kei Asogi. Kazuma Asogi. Why? Why was his name on that disc? Second is A. Shin. Shin. I don't recognize that name. The third is T. Greguson. Gregson. Ah, it would seem Tobias Gregson is the 3rd man on the list. And what's his name doing in a secret government communication as well? And the last name... What's the matter, Mrs. Sato? It's just so strange, and so unexpected. Oh, what is it, Susie? Don't keep us in suspense. The last name is J. Wilson. What? Wilson. John H. Wilson? You mean Daddy? It says only J. Wilson, so I'm afraid I can't be sure. Then after the 4 names it reads, if I translate from Japanese, that is all 4. And that's the end of the message. Or rather, the end of what you noted down, Iris. just can't believe it. Who would ever have thought that those discs contained Japanese Morse code, not to mention a strange list of some disturbingly familiar names. Is Shin the last name of the inspector who came aboard that works for the government? The secret police guy? I don't remember what his name was. It would appear that this particular message is a communication of some kind between Great Britain and the Empire of Japan. So Daddy could be in Japan then, where Susie and Runo come from. Oh, well... No, it's not very likely, really, is it? I mean, there are thousands of people with the surname Wilson, and there must be lots of J's among them. Professor John H. Wilson, visiting professor of medicine at the Imperial Yume University. But we can't tell Iris about that now. We just can't. This is so strange. Somehow, in solving the case of Mr. Windibank's murder today, I feel like I've rolled back a boulder at the mouth of a very dark cave. I do wonder if perhaps it's a dark cave that we shouldn't go wandering inside. Oh dear, the ship is going to set sail soon. Yes, it seems so. I'll sail on that steamship first to the port of Dunkirk in France, then I'll change onto a larger passenger vessel bound for Japan. You're really going then, Susie? We wish you a safe passage, Miss Susato. Thank you so much. I wish all of you the very best. Miss Susato, I had hoped to have you always at my side to guide me and support me. Mr. Naruhodo, please, come back soon. As far as I'm concerned, you really are the very best judicial assistant in the world. I'm quite sure. I'll be back before you know it. Really, Susie? Oh, now don't forget, Iris, I made you a promise I've yet to fulfill. Not spelled right. A promise? About your manuscript. Ah. Oh, yes, the Hound of the Baskervilles. Well, I'll be waiting for you then, Susie. A promise is a promise. Definitely, Iris. You should probably run if they're honking the horn and ready to go here. Mr. Naruhodo? Yes? You remember the first time we met? I don't think now's the time. Yes, of course. On the SS Buria, when I was dragged out from the wardrobe still half asleep. If I remember rightly, you threw me halfway across the cabin with a Susato takedown. Is that how this is going to end? You know very well what I'm talking about after that. It's strange, but being thrown together as we were in that case, I somehow felt straight away that you were the perfect person to continue Kazuma-sama's great legacy. Miss Susato. And my instincts were right. I really want to believe. No, I'm sure that... I'll be back soon. Farewell until then.
Somehow we seem to have come to the end of the adventures of Ryunosuke Naruhodo. Or the first volume, at least. Looking back now, it feels as though fate has led me on this journey. Fate led me to becoming a lawyer, to traveling halfway around the world, to meeting the great detective. I'm sure there'll be trials and tribulations ahead. Of course there will. But whatever happens, I know I'll be able to turn my fortunes around. After all, I have the greatest friends in the world on my side.
More? Ah, yes, Mr. Naruhodo. Yes, Mr. Sholmes. I have some rather awkward news. The railway company has decided to sue over this special express train, apparently. Huh? It caused such a commotion on the line, all the other trains had to wait at the stations. But really, we would never have made it to Dover in time otherwise. Anyway, I explained everything and how it was all your fault. Huh? I believe a formal complaint should be delivered to your office tomorrow. But not to worry, my dear fellow. According to Miss Sato, you love defending yourself in court. Huh? It's all right. I'm perfectly happy to testify. He really didn't look like the sort of man who'd do something so outrageous. See? Mr. Sholmes. Yes? A word, if you don't mind. Why, certainly. Any word you like. Bellow it out, my dear fellow. Oh, yes, I love Bruno's words. I know just the one he'll use here. Then, I really must say...
Objection!
Please tell me this is just a credit sequence. Finally. Okay. That was a very... Oh boy. In the following weeks, hundreds of music boxes arrived at Baker Street from all over Europe. Something was afoot, though it transpired I had ordered them all myself. So I advertised them for sale with used by Mr. Sholmes to solve an important case. And the money I've earned, consulting detective work, pays a pittance by comparison. Okay, so now we're getting wrap up. Aw, I haven't slept a wink. This manuscript is due tomorrow now. When I'm this busy, Hurley usually cooks me breakfast. Well, cooks is an overstatement, but some dry toast and insipid coffee, for some men. I do miss Susie and her lovely Japanese breakfasts. Oh boy, witness, your testimony is riddled with contradictions. I think this was your voice. I don't know. Exactly. Rarely do Koban coins hide under rare stakes themselves. Why are we going back to these? Oh yes, Ido. Well, Ido, no sir. Well, fuck. Well, we'll just let this play. Because I have no idea if this is like what's going on behind or if this is retrospective view. Osanaga. So he's still on the ship. So there were no consequences for him then?
suppose there wouldn't be. If he truly were working for the crown. I was under the impression that the second witness was now working for him. Oh yes, this was Rowley. Well, I suppose this is as good a way as any to get you to stay and watch the credits. And the thing is, this is the end of the first game, technically. But there is one of those little escapades, I believe, that happens at the end of this. And then, of course, the second game. Technically, we're only halfway through this Let's Play. We get to fill in the other... Oh, I thought it was zooming in on the Daruma. We get to fill in the Daruma eye. What was his wish again? To become a lawyer? Go on. More credits? Okay, well, since there's not going to be any more reading here. Yeah, man. It's a good game in the, in the sense that it is yet another result of a franchise that has been polished over several years. And like I said way back at the beginning, I had played the first Phoenix Wright games. They are the reason that I bought a Nintendo DS back in the day. And, man, this one started out pretty good. It was interesting. They did a lot to keep it interesting. They kind of changed the environments, and we went from the court case right into a murder mystery on the boat, and they kept the mechanics varied enough that didn't get tedious or boring. But that last mission was just one long slog. Oh my god. It's pretty typical of like anime plots and whatnot to just have this constant elaborate scheme going on with the plot where, oh, there's just one more twist. And I don't know, the thing about this game is that a lot of those twists were things that you, the player, have no say over. It gets to a point where you've used all the evidence, all the things that you do know, and then the game introduces something else, like a character that wasn't there, or a piece of evidence, an item or whatever. There were always things introduced. So, from a game design standpoint, I guess that's good in that it was basically like a gatekeeping mechanism, right? Like it was a way of having chapters or acts sort of blocked off from each other, right? Like you would only get to the end of one of those sequences with the things that you knew. And I suppose if it presented all possibilities at once, it'd be overwhelming. But it really was just used as a mechanism to push the story along. Rather than have the whole thing plotted out at once, and you, if you were clever, could see all the evidence, it felt like each episode was compartmentalized, I guess, if that makes sense. Like I said, you could only get so far with the evidence at hand, and then the game just had to introduce something else to you that then spread it out even further. Which, for the original chapters in the game, the first chapters in the game, wasn't too bad, but that last one, where it just kept going on and on and on and on, it was just... Ugh. And I almost feel like that was a result of a continuation of story. For like the first 3 acts, we were constantly introduced to new characters, new locations, new situations. They felt like they were their own thing, and it was only at the end there when the characters started being recurring and they had this story thread that wove in between them that it really just, it felt so long. And I guess that is also a tie-in with like the anime feel of everything, because they do that too, of course. There's always just the throwaway episodes, and I guess television in general just does that. It's got the throwaway episodes and then has the main plot, the main story thread in them. But, oh my god. And maybe I wouldn't have felt so worn out if it hadn't been for all the reading and attempting to do like 24 different voices that I don't do. I don't know if you know this. I'm not very good at voices or accents or anything like that. Accents. So this was new and different and a bit of a struggle. I'm not gonna lie. The end of part 1. The end of part 1. Is this just a screen, or is this another epilogue about to come up here? The post epilogue. Okay, good. So let's see now. Special contents. Would be escapades. Show 'em's a sweet. Morning on Baker Street when Iris has prepared breakfast for everyone. Ryunosuke. An escapade where Susato appears to be rather irritated. Mr. Natsume's room. Did I skip over all of these? Oh, okay. These all, I guess these all go in line. Did these all happen before? I'm gonna have to look at these. But anyway, we'll be going through the escapades next. So that's 5 episodes there. And once we get into the second game, we can have these, which will then show up in the new outfits. Give a little peek there. Are we going to Japan? I guess that'd be a fitting bookend. But anyway, I'll end this one here. I'll see you next time.